The day my family branded me a thief started like any other Tuesday at Miller & Sons Financial. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my father's secretary appeared at my office door, her face tight with worry. "Your father wants to see you immediately." I'm Gwendolyn. And until that moment, I thought being the black sheep of the family was the worst it could get. I was wrong. The walk to my father's office felt like a march to the gallows. Through the glass walls, I could see them waiting. My father Abel behind his massive desk, my mother Esme perched on the leather sofa, and my cousin Andrew standing by the window, his arms crossed. "Sit down," my father commanded as I entered. His voice carried none of its usual warmth. "What's going on?" I asked, but the knot in my stomach already knew. My father slid a folder across his desk. "Care to explain the discrepancies in these accounts?" I opened the folder, my hands trembling slightly. Numbers swam before my eyes, transaction records, bank statements, all highlighted in accusatory yellow. "I don't understand. These aren't my accounts." "They're linked to your department," Andrew chimed in, his voice dripping with false concern. "Over $200,000, Gwen." "How could you?" "What?" I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward. "I haven't touched any money. These aren't even my signatures." "Sit down," my mother snapped. "Stop making this worse than it already is." "Making it worse? I haven't done anything wrong." I looked from face to face, searching for any sign of doubt in their accusations. There was none. "The evidence is clear," my father said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "The transfers were made from your office computer using your login credentials." "That's impossible. Someone must have used my computer when I wasn't there. I would never—" "Enough!" My father's fist came down hard on the desk. "We've already contacted the police." The room spun. "The police? Dad, please, you have to listen to me." "I've listened enough." He stood up, straightening his tie. "You have 1 hour to clear out your office. Consider yourself terminated, effective immediately." My mother's eyes were wet with tears, but her voice was steel. "How could you do this to us? To the family name?" "I didn't do anything," I was screaming now, dignity forgotten. "Andrew, tell them. You know I wouldn't do this." Andrew shook his head, the perfect picture of family loyalty. "I'm sorry, Gwen. The numbers don't lie." Security escorted me to my office. My sister Riley watched from her cubicle as I packed my things into a cardboard box, her face a mask of confusion and hurt. Whispers followed me through the building like poisonous smoke. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Don't come to Sunday dinner. Don't contact us. We need time to deal with this disgrace." I sat in my apartment surrounded by family photos I couldn't bear to look at when my best friend Sandra called. I just heard, "Are you okay?" "They didn't even give me a chance to defend myself," I whispered, my voice breaking. 29 years of being their daughter, and they believed the worst of me in 5 minutes. "This isn't right," Sandra said firmly. "There has to be more to the story." I stared at the family photo on my coffee table. Last Christmas, all of us smiling, Andrew's arm around my shoulders. Something clicked in my mind. "There is," I said, my voice hardening. "And I'm going to find out what it is." Sandra was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do?" I picked up the photo and turned it face down. "They want to believe I'm capable of stealing? Fine, but I'm going to prove who really did this, even if it tears this family apart. Be careful, Gwen. Revenge isn't always—" "This isn't about revenge," I cut her off, but even I didn't believe that. "This is about justice, and trust me, when I'm done, they'll all know exactly what it feels like to have their world turned upside down." I hung up and opened my laptop. The cursor blinked on the search bar like a challenge. My fingers hovered over the keys for a moment before typing. How to hire a private investigator. The family that cast me out had no idea what they'd just set in motion. They thought they knew me, the troublemaker, the disappointment, the black sheep. But they were about to learn what I was really capable of. And this time, I wasn't going to play by their rules. Sandra's tiny apartment became my sanctuary in the weeks following my exile. I sat cross-legged on her worn couch, surrounded by takeout containers and financial documents I'd managed to save before being escorted out. "You're going to give yourself an ulcer," Sandra said, watching me highlight another suspicious transaction. "Look at this." I thrust the paper at her. 3 separate transfers, all exactly $67,430. Who makes transfers that specific? Someone trying to stay under the $70,000 reporting threshold? Sandra suggested, surprising me with her financial knowledge. Exactly. I circled the dates. And they're all from weeks when Andrew was handling the overseas accounts. My phone buzzed, Riley calling for the 3rd time this week. I declined the call. "You should talk to her," Sandra said softly. "She might be on your side." "There are no sides anymore, just truth and lies." I rubbed my temples. "And right now I need proof." Sandra grabbed her laptop. "Then let's get you some. I know someone who might help." An hour later, we sat across from Camden Steele in a coffee shop that had seen better days. He looked more like a college professor than a private investigator. Wire-rimmed glasses, rumpled blazer, perpetually messy hair. "So," he said, studying the documents spread between our coffee cups, "you believe your cousin framed you?" "I know he did." I leaned forward. "But I need proof that will stand up to my father's scrutiny. He thinks Andrew walks on water." Camden's eyes narrowed. "Family cases are messy. Are you sure you want to go down this road?" "They already think I'm a criminal. What else do I have to lose?" He took off his glasses, cleaning them methodically. "Your retainer is $5,000. I'll need access to any financial records you can get, and a list of Andrew's known associates." "I can get you $3,000 now," I said, my savings account screaming in protest. "The rest by the end of the month." "Deal!" He pulled out a contract. "But remember, you might not like what we find." That night, I couldn't sleep. My phone lit up with a text from Riley. "Mum's a wreck. Dad's drinking again. Please just confess and come home." I threw the phone across the room. The next morning, Camden called. "I've been reviewing the records. Your cousin's good, but he made mistakes. Small ones." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind that leave breadcrumbs. Meet me at the office in an hour." Camden's office was a converted industrial space, all exposed brick and metal filing cabinets. He had 3 monitors displaying different aspects of the investigation. "See these transactions?" He pointed to a spreadsheet. "They're all routed through a shell company in Delaware. Guess who registered it?" My heart raced. "Andrew?" "Better," Camden grinned. "His girlfriend, the one your family doesn't know about." "What girlfriend?" He pulled up a social media profile. "Meet Jessica, corporate lawyer and Andrew's secret partner for the last year. She registered the company 3 months before the money started disappearing." I stared at the photo of Andrew with his arm around a stunning redhead. "My parents think he's still dating that doctor they approved of." "People hide things for a reason," Camden said, pulling up more documents. "And your cousin's been hiding a lot." My phone buzzed again. My mother this time. The voicemail was what I expected. "The police want to press charges. If you confess now, we can work something out. Please, Gwendolyn, don't make this worse." I deleted the message and turned to Camden. "How fast can we build a case?" "Give me 2 weeks. But Gwendolyn?" His expression turned serious. "Once we start this, there's no going back. Your family will never be the same." I thought about Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings, the way Andrew always got the benefit of the doubt while I got suspicious glances. I thought about my father's disappointment and my mother's tears. "Good," I said, my voice steady. "Because the family they think they have is already a lie." Camden nodded, turning back to his monitors. "Then let's get to work." That evening, Sandra brought over wine and pizza. "You okay?" I showed her the growing evidence on my laptop. For the first time since this started, I actually am. "We found something, Sandra. Something big." She squeezed my hand. "Just be careful. Revenge can consume you." "This isn't just revenge anymore," I said, staring at Andrew's smiling face on my screen. "This is justice. And when I'm done, They'll all know exactly what it feels like to have their trust betrayed. I closed my laptop, but not before saving Jessica's photo. Andrew's perfect mask was starting to crack, and I was going to rip it off completely, no matter what it cost me. Camden's car smelled like coffee and old books as we sat outside Jessica's law firm, watching people stream in and out of the glass building. "Tell me again why we're here," I asked, shifting uncomfortably in the passenger seat. "Because people get sloppy when they're in love." Camden lifted his camera, snapping photos as Jessica emerged, Andrew close behind. "Look who's having a business lunch." They walked arm in arm to a nearby restaurant, completely wrapped up in each other. Andrew hadn't even bothered to check if anyone was watching. "Amateur," Camden muttered. "For someone stealing thousands, he's not very careful." "He never had to be," I said bitterly. "Everything was always handed to him." Camden lowered his camera. "Speaking from experience? Let's just say being the family disappointment has its advantages. Nobody expects much from you." We followed them to the restaurant, taking a booth within earshot. Camden pulled out a small recording device disguised as a phone. "Is that legal?" I whispered. "In a public place? Absolutely." He adjusted the device. "Now, quiet. Let's hear what the happy couple has to say." Andrew's voice drifted over. "The transfer's complete. Dad doesn't suspect a thing." My hands clenched under the table. Jessica's laugh tinkled like expensive crystal. "And your cousin?" "Gwen," Andrew scoffed. "She's history. Everyone bought it hook, line and sinker, even sent her packing with a police threat." "You're brilliant, baby," Jessica purred. "How much longer until we have enough?" 3 more months, max. Then we'll—" A waiter appeared at their table, drowning out the rest. Camden cursed softly. Back in his office, Camden played the recording while I paced. "It's good," he said, "but not enough. We need paper trails, bank statements." "How do we get those?" "Leave that to me." He hesitated. "There's something else you should know." I did some digging into Jessica's past. She's been involved in 3 other corporate fraud cases. "What happened?" "Nothing. She was never charged. Always had a fall guy." He gave me a meaningful look. "Sound familiar?" My phone buzzed. Riley again. This time I answered. "Gwen? Thank God, I've been so worried." "Have you?" My voice came out harder than intended. "Of course I have. Look, I know you didn't do it. You're many things, but you're not a thief." I sat down heavily. "Try telling that to Mum and Dad." "I have." But Andrew showed them more evidence yesterday. Bank transfers, emails. "What emails?" I interrupted, my heart racing. "Something about offshore accounts?" "Gwen, it looks really bad." Camden was already typing. "Emails can be traced," he mouthed. "Riley, I have to go, but thanks for calling." After hanging up, I turned to Camden. He's fabricating evidence now. "Which means he's scared." Camden cracked his knuckles. "Good. Scared people make mistakes." That evening, Sandra came over with Chinese food and found me surrounded by papers. "You look terrible," she announced, dropping the takeout on my coffee table. "Thanks. You really know how to boost a girl's confidence." "I'm serious." She cleared space to sit. "When's the last time you slept?" "Sleep is for people who haven't been framed by their golden boy cousin." Sandra grabbed the papers from my hands. "Tell me what you found today." I told her about the lunch, the recording, Jessica's history. "He's getting sloppy, Sandra. He thinks he's won." "Men like that always do," she said darkly. Then her eyes caught something in the papers. "Wait, what's this?" She pulled out a bank statement. The same odd amount, $67,430, appeared again, but this time transferred to a different account. "Camden's tracking it now," I said. "The money's moving through at least 3 shell companies before disappearing offshore." "Offshore where?" "That's what we need to find out." I grabbed my phone as it buzzed with a text from Camden. "Got something. Come to the office now." Sandra drove me. Camden was waiting with a triumphant grin. "Remember those emails Riley mentioned?" He spun his monitor toward us. Andrew got sloppy with his digital footprint. The emails were created last week, backdated to before the theft. Amateur move. "Can you prove it?" "Better." He pulled up another window. I found where the money's going. Your cousin and his girlfriend are building quite the nest egg in the Cayman Islands. My hands shook as I stared at the numbers. This is it. This is what we need. Almost, Camden cautioned. We need one more thing, proof that he accessed your computer to make the original transfers. How do we get that? He smiled grimly. We set a trap, but it's risky. You'll have to go back to the office. They'll call the police if they see me. Not if you have a good reason to be there. He held up a legal document. How about a formal deposition request? I looked at Sandra, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Camden. When do we do it? Tomorrow. Better wear something bulletproof. He paused. Metaphorically speaking, of course. I grabbed my coat. Tomorrow it is. Time to show Andrew what the family disappointment can really do. Walking into Miller & Sons Financial felt like stepping into a minefield. Every head turned as I crossed the lobby, Camden beside me with his briefcase. The security guard reached for his radio, but Camden smoothly presented the legal documents. Ms. Miller is here for a formal deposition regarding ongoing financial irregularities, he announced loudly enough for everyone to hear. Riley appeared from around the corner, coffee cup shattering on the floor when she saw me. Gwen, not now, Riley, I said, my voice steadier than my hands. My father's new secretary tried to stop us at his office. Mr. Miller is in a meeting. Perfect. Camden pushed past her. This concerns all parties involved. We burst into the office where my father sat with Andrew, both looking up in shock. Andrew's face went white. What is the meaning of this? My father demanded, standing. Camden laid out the documents. As your daughter's legal representative, I am here to formally request access to all computer logs and security footage from the dates in question. You have no right, Andrew started. Actually, we have every right, Camden interrupted. Unless you'd prefer we take this directly to the SEC. My father's face darkened. Wait outside, both of you. In the hallway, I caught Riley's eye across the office. She hurried over while Camden made a show of reviewing papers. What are you doing? She whispered. Proving my innocence. I glanced at Andrew through the glass walls. He was gesturing frantically at my father. How's Mom? A mess. She's barely eating. Riley touched my arm. Gwen, last night I heard Andrew on the phone. He sounded scared, talking about moving something offshore. Miss Miller. A security guard approached. Your father will see you now. Back in the office, my father looked 10 years older. You have 1 hour with the IT department. After that, I want you gone. We'll need access to Andrew's records as well, Camden added smoothly. Absolutely not, Andrew exploded. My father held up his hand. Enough. Give them whatever they need. I want this over with. In the IT department, Camden plugged in a device while pretending to review logs. Got it, he whispered. Remote access established. You can't be here. Andrew appeared in the doorway, his usual polish cracking. Afraid of what we'll find? I stood up, facing him. He stepped closer, voice low. You're making a mistake, Gwen. Walk away now while you still can. Like you did when they accused me? I did what I had to do. For Jessica? His face changed, fear flashing across it. I don't know what you're talking about. The offshore accounts? The shell companies? Does Dad know about those? Andrew grabbed my arm, fingers digging in. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Let go of her, Camden's voice cut through the tension. Now. Andrew released me, straightening his tie. 1 hour's almost up. Get out. As we left, Riley caught us by the elevator. Gwen, wait. There's something else. She glanced around nervously. I found something in Andrew's desk. Papers about a company in Delaware. Can you get them to me? She nodded. Tonight. I'll bring them to Sandra's. Back at Camden's office, his computer dinged continuously as data poured in from his remote access. Look at this, he pointed to the screen. Someone accessed your computer late at night multiple times, using Andrew's keycard to enter the building. Can you prove it was him? Better. He pulled up security footage. See that? He's not even trying to hide his face. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Back off or everyone learns about your little cocaine habit in college. I showed Camden. He's getting desperate. Good. Desperate people make mistakes. He frowned at his screen. Like this one. He just logged into the offshore account from his work computer. You can see that. Remote access works both ways. And? Got it. He sat back, grinning. Full access to all his transactions. Your cousin really should update his passwords more often than never. My phone buzzed again. Riley. On my way with the papers. You won't believe what I found. She's meeting us at Sandra's, I told Camden. Want to see what else Andrew's been hiding? He started packing up his equipment. After you. But Gwen? He paused. Be careful. Desperate people aren't just sloppy. They're dangerous. I thought about Andrew's grip on my arm, the threat in his voice. I know, but he's not the only one who can play dirty. As we left the office, I caught my reflection in the window. I barely recognized myself. Harder, sharper, more determined. Andrew wanted to play hardball? Fine. But he was about to learn that the family disappointment had nothing left to lose. And that made me more dangerous than he could imagine. Sandra's apartment buzzed with tension as Riley spread the documents across the coffee table. Her hands trembled as she pointed to a series of signatures. Look at these, she said. Andrew's been forging Dad's signature for months. These authorizations for international transfers. All fake. Camden examined the papers under his desk lamp. This is good, really good. But why would he risk forging these when he could just... He stopped, eyes widening. Oh, clever bastard. What? I leaned forward. These aren't just transfers, they're authorizations to create new accounts. Your father's signature gives him power to open accounts in the company's name without oversight. Sandra brought us coffee, peering over my shoulder. Is that why the money's so hard to trace? Exactly, Camden nodded. Each account creates a new layer of separation between Andrew and the stolen money. Classic laundering technique. My phone lit up with a text from Andrew. Last chance, Gwen. Walk away or things get ugly. Riley read it over my shoulder. He's scared. I've never seen him like this before. Good. I showed Camden another document. Look at these dates. They match perfectly with his trips to the Caymans. Business meetings, my ass, Riley muttered. He told Dad they were client visits. Camden's laptop pinged. Speaking of meetings, he turned the screen toward us. Your cousin just booked a flight to Grand Cayman for tomorrow. He's running, Sandra said. Not if I can help it. I grabbed my phone, but Camden caught my wrist. Wait. We need to be smart about this. If he runs, he'll transfer everything offshore before we can stop him. So what do we do? Camden smiled grimly. We let him think he's winning. Riley, can you get back into the office tonight? She nodded. I have late access for the quarterly reports. Perfect. I need you to plant something on his computer. Make him think his tracks are covered. While Camden explained the technical details to Riley, I stepped onto Sandra's balcony for air. The city lights blurred through unshed tears. Sandra followed me out. You okay? I don't know anymore. I gripped the railing. What if we're wrong? What if... Stop. She turned me to face her. I've known you since college. You're many things, but you're not a thief. And you're not crazy. My phone buzzed again. My mother this time. The police are asking more questions. Please, Gwendolyn, just confess. We can get you help. I threw the phone onto Sandra's couch through the open door. Camden emerged from his laptop cave. We've got movement. Andrew's accessing the accounts right now. We crowded around his screen, watching numbers shift between accounts. He's consolidating everything, Camden explained, getting ready to move it all at once. Can we stop him? Riley asked. Better. Camden's fingers flew over the keyboard. We can track every penny. And... got it. Full transaction history, account numbers, everything. Enough to prove it was him? I asked. Enough to put him away for a long time. Riley's phone chimed. Dad's calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. Andrew must have told him something. Perfect timing. Camden started gathering the documents. That's exactly when we'll present our evidence. I can't go, I reminded them. They'll have me arrested. You won't need to. He held up a flash drive. Everything's here. Riley can present it. Riley straightened her shoulders. I'll do it. It's time someone stood up to him. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I stared at the family photo still lying face down. My phone lit up with another message from Andrew. "You have no idea what you're about to lose." I finally replied, "Neither do you." Camden called minutes later. "Everything's set. Riley planted the files. Andrew took the bait. He thinks he's cleared his tracks. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we end this. But Gwen?" His voice turned serious. "Are you sure you want to go through with it? This will destroy your family's trust in him forever." I thought about Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings, every time Andrew got the benefit of the doubt while I got suspicious glances. I thought about my mother's tears, my father's disappointment, and Riley's quiet suffering. Their trust in him was built on lies, I said. Maybe it's time they saw the truth. "Okay then," I heard him typing. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be intense." I hung up and picked up the family photo, finally looking at it properly. Andrew's perfect smile, my forced one, the way everyone clustered around him like he was the sun. Tomorrow that sun would set. And in the darkness that followed, maybe, just maybe, the truth would finally have its day. I set the photo back down, this time facing up. Let him smile while he could. Tomorrow we'd see who had the last laugh. Camden's office became our war room as we watched the board meeting unfold through Riley's video call. She'd positioned her laptop perfectly, giving us a view of the entire conference room. My father sat at the head of the table, Andrew to his right, looking surprisingly composed for someone about to lose everything. "He's got something planned," Camden muttered, fingers hovering over his keyboard. "Look at him. Too confident." Sandra squeezed my hand as my father called the meeting to order. "First item," he announced. "Andrew has some concerns about our international holdings." Andrew stood, straightening his tie. "Thank you, Uncle Abel. As I was reviewing our accounts, I discovered some disturbing irregularities." "Irregularities like these?" Riley's voice cut through the room as she started distributing folders. Her hands shook slightly, but her voice remained steady. "What is this?" my father demanded. "Evidence," Riley said, "of who really stole the money." Andrew's smile flickered. "Riley, this isn't the time." "It's exactly the time." She connected her laptop to the projector. Camden's carefully prepared presentation appeared on the screen. "These are records of every transaction Andrew made over the past year." The room erupted in whispers. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "This is ridiculous," Andrew scoffed, but his face had lost its colour. "Uncle Abel, clearly Riley's been manipulated by Gwendolyn." "The signatures, Andrew," Riley pressed on. "Dad, look at the signatures. He's been forging your name." My father flipped through the documents, his face darkening. "These are very serious accusations." "Check your phone," Camden whispered to me. I looked down to see a message from Jessica. "Andrew says you're bluffing. You have nothing." "Now," Camden said, hitting enter on his keyboard. On the projection screen, new windows began popping up, emails between Andrew and Jessica, bank transfers, flight records to the Caymans. "What is this?" My father's voice had dropped dangerously low. "Would you like to explain?" Riley asked Andrew. "Or should I?" Andrew's composure cracked. "These documents are clearly fabricated. Like the ones you fabricated to frame Gwen." Riley's voice shook with anger. "I found the program on your computer, Andrew. The one you used to create fake emails in Gwen's name." My mother stood up suddenly. "Abel, look at this." She pointed to a transaction record. "These dates, they match exactly with when." "When you accused me," I texted Andrew. "How does it feel?" I watched him check his phone, his face contorting with rage. "This is absurd," he sputtered. "Uncle Abel, you know me. I would never—" "Call Jessica," Camden whispered. I dialed her number, putting it on speaker. The room fell silent as it rang. "Andrew?" Jessica answered. "The accounts are locked. What's happening?" Andrew lunged for his phone, but Riley was faster, putting it on the conference room speaker. "Jessica, don't—" Andrew started. "I can't access any of the offshore accounts," Jessica's panic filled the room. Did they freeze everything? Andrew, what are we going to do with the money? The silence that followed was deafening. My father stood slowly, his face ashen. Security, he said quietly into his phone. Please escort Andrew to my office and call the police. You can't do this, Andrew shouted. I built this company's international division. I made us millions. You stole millions, Riley corrected, and framed your own cousin. As security led Andrew away, my mother sank into her chair, tears streaming down her face. Gwendolyn, she whispered, what have we done? Camden closed his laptop. It's done. The authorities have been notified about the accounts. I watched through the video as my father buried his face in his hands. Riley's camera caught Andrew being led past the conference room, his perfect mask finally shattered. How do you feel? Sandra asked softly. I stared at the screen, at my broken family trying to process the truth. I don't know. My phone buzzed with a message from my father. Come home, please. We need to talk. Are you going to go? Camden asked. I thought about all the Sunday dinners I'd missed, all the nights I'd cried myself to sleep, all the times I'd wondered if revenge would feel as good as I'd imagined. Not today, I replied to my father. I need time, just like you did. Sandra hugged me as Riley ended the video call. It's over, Gwen. You did it. But watching my family's world crumble didn't feel like victory. It felt like truth. Painful, necessary truth. And, as Andrew's words echoed in my head, you have no idea what you're about to lose. I realized he'd been wrong. I'd already lost everything. The only difference was now he had too. The police station hummed with fluorescent lights and hushed conversations as I sat across from Detective Morris, watching her review the evidence for the third time. This is quite thorough, she said, looking up from Camden's files. Your PI did excellent work. Will it be enough? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. More than enough. Mr. Andrew Miller won't be seeing daylight for quite some time. She closed the folder. Though I have to ask, why didn't you come to us sooner? Would you have believed me? The family disappointment over the golden boy? A commotion outside interrupted her response. Through the glass walls, I saw my parents arriving with Riley. My mother's eyes were red-rimmed, my father's shoulders slumped with the weight of betrayal. They're here to give their statements, Detective Morris explained. Would you like to? No, I stood quickly. I should go. But as I turned to leave, my mother's voice caught me. Gwendolyn. I froze, hand on the door handle. Her footsteps approached, hesitant. Please, she whispered. Just look at me. I turned. The woman who had so quickly believed the worst of me now looked small, broken. I'm so sorry, she choked out. We should have listened. We should have… Mrs. Miller, Detective Morris interrupted gently. We need your statement now. My father stepped forward. Gwen, about the company accounts. Don't. I cut him off. I don't work there anymore, remember? Riley touched my arm as I passed. Andrew's talking, telling them everything. Of course he is, I said bitterly. Anything to save himself. Outside, Camden waited in his car. How'd it go? They're taking statements, building their case. I buckled my seatbelt. Can we go? Actually, he checked his rearview mirror, we have one more stop. We pulled up outside a luxury apartment building where Jessica lived. Police cars surrounded the entrance. Why are we here? Because, Camden nodded toward the door, sometimes karma needs a little push. We watched as officers led Jessica out in handcuffs, her perfect makeup streaked with tears. She spotted me and her face contorted. You, she screamed. You ruined everything. No, I called back calmly. Andrew did that all by himself. My phone buzzed, a text from Andrew's number. I hope you're happy. You destroyed our family. You did that, I typed back, the moment you decided to frame me. Camden drove me home, but as we pulled up to my apartment, he hesitated. There's something else you should know. Your father called me earlier. My stomach clenched. And? The board is meeting tomorrow. They're voting on new leadership. He glanced at me. They want you to come back. I laughed harshly. They must be desperate. They're trying to save the company's reputation. A redemption story sells better than a scandal. And if I say no, then you walk away clean. Your name's cleared. You don't owe them anything. My phone lit up with messages. Riley, my mother, my father, even old colleagues offering congratulations and apologies. They're calling an emergency family meeting tonight, Riley's text read. Please come. We need to make this right. Sandra appeared at my car window, knocking gently. Thought you might need backup. How did you… Riley called me. She opened my door. Come on, I'll make coffee and you can tell me why you're sitting in a car instead of celebrating. Inside her apartment, surrounded by the same takeout containers and case files that had become our war room, I finally broke down. I thought I wanted revenge, I sobbed. But this, seeing them all broken like this, that's because you're not Andrew, Sandra said firmly. You wanted justice, not destruction. My phone buzzed again. Detective Morris. Andrew's confessed to everything. We'll need you to testify. What are you going to do? Sandra asked. I stared at the family photo still lying face down on her coffee table. I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. In court, at the family meeting, everywhere. And the company? I thought about my father's office, Andrew's empty desk, the family legacy built on trust and shattered by betrayal. I don't know yet. I picked up my phone, typing a response to Riley. I'll be there tonight, but I'm bringing Sandra. And Camden? Sandra asked with a slight smile. He's done enough. I stood up, suddenly feeling lighter. It's time I faced my family on my own terms. As we prepared to leave for the family meeting, I finally turned the photo face up. The perfect family smile now seemed like a mask, one that had finally cracked to reveal the truth underneath. And maybe, just maybe, that truth would set us all free. The family estate's dining room felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the weight of everything that had happened. Or maybe it was just that I'd outgrown the need for its grandeur. The board voted unanimously, my father said, his voice echoing in the tense silence. They want you to take over Andrew's position. I set down my water glass carefully. And what do you want? We want you home, my mother whispered from across the table. We want to make things right. Riley squeezed my hand under the table. Sandra, sitting on my other side, gave me an encouraging nod. Making things right isn't that simple, I said. You believed the worst of me without a second thought. We were wrong, my father's voice cracked. I was wrong. I let Andrew blind me because he told me what I wanted to hear. And now you're doing the same thing. I stood up. Offering me his job because it's convenient, because it looks good for the company. No, my father pushed back his chair, because you're the only one who was strong enough to stand up for the truth, even when it cost you everything. Detective Morris's words from earlier echoed in my head. Andrew's looking at 15 years minimum. Jessica took a plea deal to testify against him. The company needs new leadership, my father continued. Someone who understands that integrity matters more than appearances. And you think that's me? The black sheep? The survivor, Riley corrected. The one who fought back. My mother reached across the table, her hand trembling. We don't deserve your forgiveness, but please give us a chance to earn it. I looked at Sandra, who nodded slightly. Tell them, she mouthed. I got another job offer, I said quietly. Camden's expanding his investigation firm. He wants me to head the financial crimes division. The silence that followed was deafening. That's… My father cleared his throat. That's wonderful. Is that what you want? My mother asked. I want to help other people who've been framed, betrayed, written off. I met their eyes one by one. I want to make sure no one else goes through what I did. Then do both, Riley suggested suddenly. Work with Camden, but consult for the company. Help us rebuild the right way. My father's eyes lit up. She's right. We need someone who knows how to spot fraud, who understands both sides of the system. On my terms, I said firmly. Complete autonomy. And I want Riley promoted to senior management. Riley's head snapped up. What? You stood up to Andrew. You risked everything to expose the truth. The company needs more of that. My father nodded slowly. Agreed. To all of it. And Sunday dinners? My mother asked softly. I thought about all the empty chairs at Sandra's table, all the nights spent planning revenge instead of healing. We start over, I said. No pretenses. No perfect family act. Just truth. I'd like that, Riley smiled through tears. My phone buzzed. A text from Camden. How's it going? They're trying, I typed back. So am I. The police finished processing Andrew's office today, my father said. Would you help me go through it tomorrow? I saw the cost of that request in his eyes, the admission of betrayal, the need for help, the desire to make amends. Yes, I said. But first, there's something else we need to do. I pulled out the old family photo from my bag, the one that had lain face down for so long. Then I took out a new frame. Sandra took this last week, I said, showing them a photo of Riley and me outside Camden's office, laughing at something off camera. Real smiles, real moments, that's what family should be. My mother touched the photo gently. It's beautiful. It's honest, I corrected. And that's what I need from all of you. Complete honesty. They nodded, and for the first time, I believed them. Then let's begin again, my father said, raising his glass. To truth. To consequences, Riley added. To family, my mother whispered. I looked at Sandra, my constant through the storm, at Riley, who chose truth over loyalty, at my parents, trying to rebuild from the ashes of their perfect illusion. To justice, I said, raising my glass, and to whatever comes next. Outside, the sun was setting on the family estate, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn, but inside, in the warm light of truth and reconciliation, something new was beginning. Not perfect, not unbroken, but real, and that was worth fighting for.
At last, our dream of building a new, spacious house had come to fruition, and my excitement was bubbling over as I envisioned beginning a fresh chapter in our lives. However, just as we were about to celebrate, an unexpected twist occurred. My in-laws showed up unannounced. With a firm tone, they stated, "We'll be moving in here," and asked that my parents leave the property. I was taken aback and turned to my husband for support, but all he could muster was a deep breath, followed by, "Please do as they ask. Let your parents know gently." As I watched my in-laws eagerly unpack and settle into what was supposed to be our new home, I felt a mix of disbelief and frustration. "Do you realize this is our house?" I asked, hoping they might acknowledge the misunderstanding. "My name is Tiffany, I'm 32, and I've been enjoying a loving marriage with my husband, Jesse, for 4 years. We don't have children yet, but our life is filled with affection and mutual support. Recently, I've been concerned about my aging parents. Their declining mobility has been weighing on my mind, prompting me to suggest that Jesse and I move in with them to provide care." Jesse agreed without hesitation, appreciating the dual benefits of our presence, offering them support and giving us peace of mind. "It's a win-win situation," he had said, and I was deeply thankful for his understanding and support. We contemplated this plan, but logistics proved difficult. My family's home is quite a distance from the city, complicating our commutes as neither of us drives. Additionally, relocating my parents to our small city rental wasn't a viable option, especially as it was already cramped for just the two of us, and contemplating future children would only exacerbate the space issue. Faced with these challenges, I proposed a bold solution. Why not build a new home that could accommodate everyone comfortably? Jesse's face lit up at the idea. "That's a fantastic idea," he exclaimed. Energized by his enthusiasm, we embarked on the journey of planning and building a home that would suit all our needs. When I shared the news with my parents about building a home that would accommodate everyone, they initially felt a twinge of guilt for the inconvenience. However, once I laid out our reasons, Their apprehension turned into excitement, which brought immense relief and joy to me. Later, my husband and I visited a real estate agency to iron out the final details of our project. We prioritized finding locations near hospitals to ensure easy access to medical care for my parents and close to train stations to simplify our daily commutes. During our discussions about the house's specifics, I noticed my parents were a bit hesitant about the idea of moving in with us. Thankfully, my husband came through with several insightful suggestions that helped smooth out the planning process. As we progressed, our dream home started to take form, and the excitement was palpable. After extensive discussions and a lot of online research, we finalized our plans and were ready to start consulting with builders. "We're nearly there with the preparations," I remarked, acknowledging how building a home was proving more complex than anticipated. "Balancing this with work certainly makes progress slow," my husband added, reflecting on the challenges we faced. We invested considerable time and effort into our plans, and the results were immensely satisfying. The blueprint we meticulously crafted far exceeded our expectations. We consulted various real estate agents and conducted thorough online research to get to this point. Now, all that was left was to eagerly await the completion of our house. It would take some time, but the excitement and anticipation were limitless. However, as the project advanced, my in-laws began to show increased interest. "Dear, we heard you're building a new house, is that right?" they asked one day. "Yes, that's correct. We're aiming to finish it by the end of the year," I replied. "How wonderful. I'm so impressed with Jesse's efforts and how he keeps us updated with all the details," they exclaimed, showing genuine interest in our endeavor. When my mother-in-law expressed a sudden enthusiasm to visit us soon, I was taken aback but agreed happily. Over the upcoming weekend, my husband and I planned a trip to their place. They greeted us with warm smiles, and the conversation quickly turned to our new home project. "Building a brand new home is such a joyous event, isn't it?" my father-in-law remarked, his tone reflective as if he was recalling his own experiences. "Yes, we're very excited," I replied. "We hope the construction wraps up smoothly and quickly so we can move in as soon as possible." We all shared a laugh over the exciting journey ahead. Curious, my mother-in-law asked, "Could we see the blueprints?" In response, my husband pulled out his phone and showed them a photo of the design. "Oh, it's quite spacious," she observed, "and so many rooms." "Yes, well, we'll be living with my parents, so we needed the extra space," I explained. Both in-laws looked at my husband in disbelief. "You're all moving in together?" they asked. "Yes," my husband confirmed. "Since my parents are getting older, we suggested living together, which led us to decide to build a new house." "Really? I see," they responded, their tone shifting subtly, revealing a hint of discomfort. Wanting to ease the tension, I quickly changed the subject. "How have you both been? How's your health?" "We're doing well, no major changes, just the usual routine," they replied, but curiosity about our plans lingered. "Tell us more about the new house. Which room will your parents be using?" they inquired. As my husband pointed to the blueprint to explain, I noticed the mood had indeed shifted. He seemed oblivious to the change, but I could see that their expressions had tensed up. Despite this, we continued discussing the layout, hopeful that our shared excitement for the new beginnings would eventually put everyone at ease. When my in-laws learned that my parents would be moving in with us, I worried they might feel like we were giving my parents special treatment. Despite my slight guilt, I hoped they would understand our decision, considering my parents' needs. However, it was becoming apparent that they were finding it hard to accept. The construction of our new home was moving forward smoothly, and with each visit, we could see it nearing completion. My husband often expressed his excitement about moving in quickly, but, like him, I was torn between eagerness for our new start and a desire for everything to be just right. Halfway through the construction, my parents came to see the progress. Their delight and gratitude made me deeply thankful that we could provide this new home for them. Meanwhile, I noticed that my husband had been visiting his parents almost every weekend recently. "Are you planning to visit your parents again this weekend?" I asked him. "Yeah, I am," he replied. I remarked on his frequent visits since the beginning of the year, to which he responded, "I want to show my appreciation to them as well. That's why I've been making an effort to visit them on my days off." Understanding his intentions, I asked, "Should I come along?" I was concerned that his parents might feel left out or disappointed, possibly hoping that they would be the ones moving in with us. I thought visiting them might be a good gesture of goodwill. However, my husband reassured me, "It's all right, I can manage it on my own," and left for his parents' home. I decided to respect his choice and promised to support him as needed. Time flew by, and soon our new house was finally ready. On a moving day, we loaded the car with boxes and set off to our new home, bubbling with excitement and ready to start this new chapter together. As we pulled up to our new home, the sight of it was so breathtaking that I couldn't help but exclaim, "Wow, our new home!" It symbolized the beginning of a brand new chapter. I found myself daydreaming about our future life there, imagining cooking meals while watching my husband play with our future child in the yard or hosting family barbecues. These thoughts heightened my excitement even further. Just then, my parents called. They were supposed to move in with us, but informed us that they'd be delayed due to traffic. They urged us to start settling in, but I insisted, "We'll wait for you," planning to share this sentiment with my husband. To my surprise, however, his parents showed up unexpectedly. I stared in disbelief as they got out of their car, all smiles, and approached us. "Look at this magnificent house. It's impressive enough to show off to our friends," they exclaimed. "Yes, it's the house that Jesse and I carefully planned," I replied. "Tiffany, you have excellent taste," my mother-in-law complimented. "Well, I suppose I can give her credit for that," I said, managing a thankful nod. To my astonishment, they began unloading a considerable amount of luggage from their car. Baffled, I quickly asked, "Mother-in-law, father-in-law, why do you have so much stuff? What are you planning to do?" Their reply caught me completely off guard. "What do you mean? We're moving our things into this house," they said. "You're planning to live here starting today? But you'll need to ask your parents to leave," they continued. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief and frustration. My mother-in-law then explained, "As a new bride, it's customary to prioritize your husband's family." The unexpected twist left me struggling to reconcile the joy of our new beginning with the sudden challenge of balancing family expectations and our carefully laid plans. Feeling a wave of emotions, I turned to my husband for support when his parents declared that they should be the ones moving into the new house. Taking a deep breath, he told me, "Just let your parents know gently." I felt a rush of disbelief. This house was intended for me and my parents. "I can't accept this decision," I protested. His response came with visible irritation. "Didn't my mom just explain that it's natural for a wife to prioritize her husband's family? We can address your parents' situation later." I was stunned. It was painfully clear that my husband was either under heavy influence from his parents or shared their views, which were now glaringly apparent. "Come on, help with the moving," he urged as his parents began unloading their belongings, despite my parents and I not having set foot inside the house yet. "Oh, how wonderful! The interior is just splendid!" they exclaimed, eagerly exploring the house. I confronted them. "Do you even know whose house this is?" "What?" they responded, clearly taken aback. After a brief pause, they turned to face me, asserting, "Whose house? Of course it's Jesse's house. Are you suggesting you have a claim to it? Since you and Jesse are living here, and he's put so much into building this house, you have no right to make any claims without letting us explain first." It seemed my in-laws had jumped to conclusions and were quick to place blame on me, indicating that my husband hadn't shared the full details about our financial contributions to the house. "Why would your parents live in Jesse's house in the first place?" they questioned. "Yes, it's strange. Poor Jesse having such a demanding wife and parents," they added scornfully. I reached my breaking point. Why am I being criticized for their misunderstandings? If you intend to live here, then Jesse should compensate for the amount spent, I argued. I've contributed to this house, I asserted, facing their disbelief. How much are you claiming to have paid? It must be a small amount, maybe $100, they mocked. My husband, looking uncomfortable, remained silent. I turned to him, challenging, Are you being honest? How high and mighty do you think you are? He hesitated, unsure of what to say next. What are you insinuating? My mother-in-law demanded, her tone authoritative, noticing my husband's reluctance to address the situation. Deciding to clarify things once and for all, I spoke up. I paid for this house entirely with my savings. If you plan to live here, I expect repayment of $460,000 for the cost of the house. My in-laws were visibly shocked. Their mouths hung open and their eyes widened in disbelief. They quickly turned to my husband for confirmation. Jesse, is this true? Did Tiffany buy this house? They asked, struggling to grasp the reality of the situation. My husband nodded a slight affirmation. Yes, Tiffany bought the house. She was promoted recently and now earns more than I do. He then admitted something more personal. But even though I've been working for a long time and graduated from a prestigious university, I made a significant mistake at work. I can't be promoted and even had a pay cut. Now I'm earning as much as a new employee. The room fell silent as they processed this news. We never imagined Jesse would be in such a situation. After a moment of stunned silence, their attitude toward me shifted dramatically. Tiffany, we're truly sorry for our earlier comments. We misunderstood everything. Please forgive us and let us stay in this house, they pleaded, their tone full of regret and apology. My husband also joined in, bowing deeply. Please, it's my fault for not telling you sooner. Let us stay here with you. Their sudden change in demeanor and plea for forgiveness left me completely taken aback. Despite their apologies, I stood firm. No matter how much you plead, I can't accept this. I built this house to live with my parents. If that's not possible, there's no point in keeping this house. If you want to live here, you'll need to pay me $460,000. We don't have that kind of money, they replied, their faces falling. Then it seems you'll need to find somewhere else to go, I said, resolute in my decision. Wait, they interjected. We sold our previous home and moved out. When my in-laws realized they could potentially be evicted from our new house, they became desperate. Tiffany, please let us stay. Your parents can live with us too, they pleaded. The thought of living under one roof with both sets of parents seemed unmanageable to me. I can't agree to that. If you sold your house, you must have some funds left. Why not use that to find a flat? I asked. At this, tears welled up in their eyes. The truth is, we lost a significant amount in a bad investment. The money from selling our house and our retirement savings went toward paying off that debt. We have nothing left. I'm retired and my wife has been a housewife for years, so she can't work at this age. You're our only hope, they confessed. Despite their heartfelt plea, I felt that the situation was a result of their financial mismanagement. If you need help, shouldn't you be asking your son for support? I'm not in a position to support strangers, I replied. Aren't we family too? They asked, their voices laden with emotion. That's too much to ask. Can't you at least help us a little? They continued to plead. I was firm. It's impossible. I can't even fathom living with someone whose family is trying to take over our home. In a moment of intense frustration, I blurted out, Jesse, let's get a divorce. What? Wait a minute. I can't even think about a divorce. I'm sorry, but I can't forgive this. Please leave right now, I demanded. The mention of divorce sent my husband into a panic while his parents continued to plead. However, my resolve had hardened. If you plan to stay here, I'll call the police, I warned, prompting my in-laws to leave in fear. My husband, dismayed, protested, I'm still your husband. I should have the right to stay here. If you insist, I'll take legal action, I replied firmly. Realizing that a lawsuit could jeopardize his job, he quickly gathered his belongings and left. Shortly after he departed, my parents arrived, confused by his absence. They were shocked when I explained the situation, but expressed their gratitude. Thank you for standing up for us, they said. I wished my husband had been more understanding, but I was relieved to have distanced myself from such a selfish in-law family, especially before our child was born. The divorce process proceeded smoothly, and I soon found myself single again. Now, I enjoyed peaceful days in our newly built house with my parents, grateful for the tranquility that had replaced the chaos. Hello, my name is Doris, and I am 35 years old. 6 years ago, I married my husband Mason, who is 3 years my senior. My life changed significantly when my beloved father passed away from an illness, leaving behind a substantial inheritance. I invested this inheritance in purchasing a new house, which I cherish dearly. The fresh scent of wood in this house is comforting, and I often think about how proud my father would be to see it. Previously, my father lived alone in our old house, a mere 10-minute walk from our apartment, after my mother passed away and I moved out. A few years ago, my father suffered a fall and passed away not long after. With the inheritance, I made the difficult decision to demolish our old family home and build a new one in its place. I believe that while the structure of the old house is no longer there, the joyful memories we made will forever reside in our hearts. Mason often quoted my father about the significance of building a new home as a fresh start. Initially, I thought he was trying to comfort me, but it soon became clear that was not the case. One evening, Mason abruptly asked me to fill out and submit divorce papers. Confused, I asked him what he meant. He bluntly stated that we were getting a divorce and that the new home, built with my father's inheritance, was intended for his mistress, with whom he planned to live. I was shocked to learn of his infidelity. He admitted to having an affair for about 9 months. He described his mistress as charming, kind, and genuinely in love with him, a stark contrast to how he described our relationship. Mason claimed that coming home to me was always unpleasant and declared his intention to take the house as alimony, arguing that our childless 6-year marriage had no further benefits for him. Distraught, I sought comfort from Mason, but was met with blame instead. He accused me of being responsible for his actions, asserting that my demeanor pushed him toward his affair and eventual decision to leave. He handed me an envelope containing $12,000, calling it my alimony, and told me to be grateful as he planned to take the new house. Overwhelmed by his betrayal yet composed, I returned the envelope to him, refusing the money. The house, built with memories and inheritance meant to be a sanctuary, had become the center of a heartbreaking revelation. I agreed to the divorce, stating plainly, "If you don't love me anymore, there's no point in us staying married. I don't need the money." Mason seemed surprised by how readily I accepted the end of our marriage. With a nod, he warned, "Well, if you say so, just don't ask for it back later." Within a few days, he had packed up his belongings and left, taking the keys to our newly built house with him. However, shortly after he moved out, Mason frantically called me, his voice tense with panic. "What did you do? The police showed up at the house talking about warrants and charges of trespassing. What's going on?" According to him, the police had barged in while he was with his mistress, demanding to know if they understood the legality of their actions. "We're here because you entered this house with a stolen key, which is both theft and trespassing. Do you understand that?" the officers explained. Mason, shocked and confused, turned to his mistress, who was just as bewildered. "Isn't this your house? You said you wanted to show me?" she murmured. "Be quiet and stay out of this," he snapped as one officer interrupted. "Sorry to disrupt, but we need to handle this at the station." Caught between the police and his mistress, Mason called me in desperation. "Why is this happening all of a sudden? What did you do?" "I haven't done much," I replied calmly. "I simply reported that my house keys were stolen and that strangers were in my home. It's only natural to call the police. I had already filed the divorce papers, reverted to my maiden name Doris, and reported the situation." "This is my house, Mason," I continued, standing firm. "Didn't you agree to give it to us as alimony?" he argued. "I never agreed to that," I countered. "It's convenient for you to twist things to fit your narrative. Are you joking? How can you think that house is yours? I'm the one on the house contract. I paid for it with my inheritance from my father. Plus, I own the land, I stated definitively. But your father said it was for us, Mason protested weakly. That was when you were my husband. Now we're divorced and practically strangers. Why would you think it's your land? I replied sharply. My father had wisely transferred the land rights to me when he fell ill to prevent any complications if something happened to him. Perhaps he foresaw something like this, which might be why he advised demolishing the old house and building a new one. It was clear to me now more than ever that money and property could easily become points of contention. When I agreed to the divorce, Mason's usually calm demeanor started to make sense to me. So, you planned this all along, I realized. He defensively replied, I did nothing wrong. You've misunderstood everything from the start. It was almost comical to see him so clueless, thinking he would be happy with his mistress. Stop being ridiculous, I retorted. You blame me for the affair, the divorce, and losing the house. How does it feel now, being caught between your girlfriend and the police? Mason could only muster a groan in response, clearly uncomfortable with the turn of events. Hating me as misguided, this mess is entirely what you're doing. Ever heard of you reap what you sow? This is what you deserve. At that moment, Mason's anger erupted, and he began shouting accusations over the phone, but suddenly his voice was interrupted. Excuse me, are you Mr. Gold's ex-wife? He's causing a disturbance at your house. Could we have a word, please? A police officer had taken over the call. I took a moment to explain the situation to the officer, who sympathized with how difficult this must have been for me. Later on, Mason and his mistress were taken to the police station. Mason insisted that the house was a gift from me and claimed it wasn't a case of trespassing. His mistress, genuinely surprised, stated she had no idea they were trespassing. Mason tried to support his claims with so-called evidence at the station, but ultimately the mistress's statement was found credible, and she was released with just a warning. Mason, however, was found guilty of theft and trespassing and received a fine. The issue then arose that Mason had named me as his guarantor upon his release, probably because he didn't want his strict parents to find out. The officer, clearly exasperated, relayed this information to me. Why should I be his guarantor? We're divorced and practically strangers now, I replied firmly. I have no connection with Mr. Gold anymore, so I refuse. He has parents nearby. Please contact them. The officer informed Mason, who was visibly frustrated. His parents, who were already aware of our divorce due to his infidelity, were not yet informed of his attempt to take the new house. The police call had brought them fully up to speed on the situation. Reluctantly, after his parents requested more details, I visited Mason's parents' house. When I knocked on the door and started to explain, his mother immediately cut me off. No need to apologize, his mother said. It's all my foolish son's fault. But did you know about this? About what? I inquired. Well, my son is here with his mistress, a much younger woman, she revealed. We allowed them into the living room to discuss the situation. To my astonishment, Mason had brought his mistress along, creating a tense atmosphere. The living room scene unfolded with Mason, the young woman, and my stern-looking father-in-law, Russell. Russell, it's been a while. I'm sorry for the delay, I greeted them. Doris, thanks for coming, Russell responded. I apologize for calling you after the divorce, but I've heard Mason's side of the story. However, I can't fully trust someone who's been arrested for trespassing. Can you tell me your side? I recounted everything as requested. Throughout my explanation, Mason and his mistress kept their heads bowed, avoiding eye contact. What were you thinking, trying to take Doris's new house? Are you insane? Russell demanded of Mason. It's not that simple, Mason interjected. Resolved how? Is that even possible? Russell retorted, clearly frustrated. Your story is completely different from hers. Apparently, Mason had spun his version of events before I arrived. What were you told? I asked. Russell explained. He claimed you willingly transferred the house to him, then changed your story and reported him, leading to his wrongful arrest. Really? He said that? I was incredulous. It's true that when we discussed the house, I didn't object, but that doesn't mean I agreed to transfer ownership. To suddenly claim the house as yours and report it, it's beyond comprehension. I'm so sorry, Doris, for having such a son, Mason's mother apologized. What are you saying, Mom? I'm telling the truth. Doris wasn't agreeing. She was too stunned to speak, Mason argued. How could you misunderstand and still claim to be her husband? I nodded in agreement with Russell. Despite everything, Mason continued to make excuses. Anyway, you never mentioned owning the land. If I'd known, I wouldn't have done this. If I had told you, you'd have found another excuse to do the same thing, I replied. How can you say that? Were you spending a lot on her? Mason asked, gesturing towards his mistress. No, why would you think that? I responded. Right after our divorce, I happened to run into one of your colleagues. When I mentioned the divorce, I received some shocking information that left me reeling, I continued. Mason's colleague had looked uncomfortable during our conversation. No offense, but I thought it might happen, the colleague had said. What do you mean? Didn't he tell you? I asked the colleague. Shifting uncomfortably, the colleague finally spilled everything, revealing details that I should have known sooner. I wasn't initially aware of the full extent of Mason's actions, but a conversation with one of his colleagues soon brought everything to light. Mason had been openly bragging about his mistress, a woman 15 years his junior, lavishing her with expensive bags and jewelry. He boasted about his plans, even sharing that he intended to divorce me to marry his mistress, capitalizing on her recent inheritance from her deceased father to build a new house. He said, once the house is built, I'll divorce Doris and somehow claim it, no matter the opposition. I'll get it, and then my young new wife and I will live in the big house, the colleague recounted. It seemed the house built with my father's inheritance was not just a home, but a grand gesture intended for his proposal to her. Hearing this, I confronted Mason. I've heard everything. Do you still insist you did nothing wrong? I asked, my frustration evident. Mason, visibly flustered, attempted to justify his actions. Well, yes, I bought her gifts, so what? I used my own money and gave Doris her living expenses. She's not my destined partner, this woman is. I brought her here today to announce our marriage. His parents, present during this confession, reacted with shock. However, the most astonishing response came from the mistress herself. Marry you? Did I ever say that? We're not even dating, she declared. What do you mean? Mason asked, bewildered. Exactly that, she replied firmly. I'm not in a relationship with him. I only approached him for a sugar daddy arrangement. I told you from the start that I was looking for someone for that kind of arrangement, and even married men were acceptable. You agreed to it initially, but now, what are you talking about? That's creepy, she stated. Mason went pale, stunned by her revelation. At that point, I asked her, so why did you come here with him today? The mistress explained. I came to ask for more time to pay the alimony. I knew he was married, so it was an affair, and I was prepared to pay the alimony, but I'm still a student. A student? How old are you? Russell, Mason's father, interjected, looking bewildered. I lost my parents early and have been engaging in sugar dating to pay for college. I sold all the gifts for living expenses, she confessed. This revelation turned the entire room silent, leaving everyone to digest the depth of deception and the surprising turn of events. As the discussion unfolded, the mistress clarified her financial situation, indicating she didn't have savings to immediately start paying the alimony. I've just secured a job and can start paying alimony from my salary, she explained. So you came here to ask me to wait for the alimony? I asked. Yes, that's right, she confirmed. Mason, who had been silently listening, suddenly erupted in anger. Didn't you hear her? Unfortunately, she never intended to marry or even date you, but that's separate from the alimony you owe, I pointed out, trying to steer the conversation back to the matter at hand. What about saying you wanted a house? Mason challenged the mistress. I meant I'd want a house someday when I marry. It wasn't about marrying you, she replied, clarifying her intentions. Mason exclaimed in disbelief. I was suddenly taken to that house thinking it was yours. Then the police came and I learned it was your wife's. The mistress bowed deeply to me. indicating her respect and acknowledging that all of this confusion was spurred by Mason's misunderstandings. "All right," I said, seeing an opportunity to resolve at least one issue. "If you promise to pay the alimony properly, I'll wait for the payment, but promise me, no more sugar dating. It might not end simply next time." "I promise I'll never do it again," she said earnestly. Turning to Mason, I addressed the financial aspects of our separation. "Expect a claim for alimony from me without delay." "Alimony? What are you talking about?" Mason asked, taken aback and not expecting to pay alimony himself. "You said you didn't need alimony when you returned the money," I reminded him. "I gave you $12,000 and now you're asking for more? That's not what we agreed on," Mason protested. "I don't recall any agreement," I replied. "You returned the $12,000 I gave you, saying you didn't need it. What I meant was that I didn't need such a trivial amount for alimony. Do you have any idea how much alimony for infidelity is? It's $30,000, I clarified. "And you're also at fault for not having children in the 6 years we were married," Mason suddenly accused, changing the subject. At that moment, a loud slap echoed through the room. Someone asked, "What are you doing, Mason?" He held his cheek, clearly stunned by the impact. "Are you serious? Do you think her inability to have children is her fault?" I asked, incredulous at his audacity. "Enough with your jokes, Dad," Mason's father interrupted, turning to him. "Don't tell me you're blaming Doris for your affair, too." "Well, that's how it is," Mason said defiantly. "I should have never married her. It's like fraud." "How could you think that?" I challenged him. "Your parents wanted grandchildren. If she couldn't get pregnant, they thought it was better to split up. That's why I chose her." "If you truly believe that," Mason's father said, visibly disappointed, "then we must have raised you wrong. It took your mother 8 years to conceive you." Mason's mother, Deborah, had endured 8 long years of intense fertility treatments before Mason was born. The strain and heartache of watching others easily start families while she struggled were immense. Now, as she listened to the unfolding drama, tears streamed down her cheeks, a silent witness to the pain revisited by her son's actions. Mason's father, Russell, deeply disappointed, finally said, "Leave this house now." Mason, clearly bewildered, asked, "Why? You're a long-awaited son and I can't bear to look at you now." Russell responded with heavy sadness in his voice. "Don't come back until you truly understand your mistakes." "But where should I go?" Mason asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "Back to our apartment?" I interjected. "That apartment has already been canceled. With the new house, there was no need to keep it. I canceled it right after reporting it to the police. You have no place to return to." Mason was visibly shaken, realizing he had nowhere to go. In his frustration, he turned his blame toward his mistress. "It's your fault. All the money is spent, and now you say you never intended to marry me? It's fraud." She remained calm and responded, "I was clear about it being a sugar relationship from the start. I never asked for money or gifts. If you want to sue, go ahead, but I have proof of our arrangement." "And don't forget the alimony," I chimed in, seeing Mason flustered. "Wait, please wait," he stammered. Ignoring his plea, I contacted his parents to inform them of the situation and then left their house. Later, I hired a lawyer and sent a demand letter for the alimony. Knowing Mason no longer lived at his parents' house, I made sure it wasn't sent there. "Why is it being sent here?" the receptionist at Mason's workplace asked, puzzled as she looked at the letter. "It's possible to send such documents to both residential and employment addresses," I explained. "Is this what this is about?" she inquired, noticing Mason's pale, shaken demeanor. "Yes," I confirmed. "I just told the truth. No one asked me to keep quiet. It's his own doing." The arrival of the demand letter at Mason's workplace quickly spread the news about his actions, including his involvement in sugar dating. This revelation sparked a wider discussion among his colleagues, casting a shadow over his professional reputation. After a series of embarrassing losses and being unable to cope with the whispers and rumors, Mason decided to resign from his job, insisting that he was leaving on his terms. his difficulties didn't stop there. He sought out free legal advice, convinced that he was a victim of marriage fraud. However, the legal advisor was not encouraging. "We've seen cases like yours, but based on the evidence you've provided, this isn't considered fraud. You initially agreed to a sugar relationship," the advisor explained. "If you develop feelings later on, that was on your part alone. You can sue if you wish, but it's likely just a waste of money." Heeding the advice, Mason chose not to file the lawsuit. Feeling defeated, he later confided in me, regretting his past actions. "I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't realize how significant you were, even after 6 years together. I promise I'll make you happy this time and won't let myself be distracted by others," he pleaded earnestly. However, his plea did not move me. My decision was firm. "I refuse," I replied sharply. "Why, after all this begging?" he persisted. Over those 6 years, I had come to recognize that Mason was not a good person. He blamed everything on me, tried to take what was mine, and then shamelessly returned after losing everything, expecting reconciliation. "What benefit would there be for me to reunite with someone so selfish?" I questioned. Mason protested. "You don't have to put it that way. You once said the same things to me." Nonetheless, I was resolute. "Never contact me again," I stated firmly, aware of his current predicament. I then hung up, deleted all his contact information, and changed my phone number. A few days later, an unexpected incident occurred. "Your ex-husband came to the house the other day," one of the neighbors informed me. "We had to chase him away after he caused a disturbance." What was he thinking? I wondered aloud, shocked. The neighborhood ladies, familiar with the situation, had even pretended to call the police to scare him off. Since then, I haven't seen him and am unsure of his whereabouts or his current situation, but I'm confident that he isn't leading a happy life. I made a difficult decision and announced, "Once I leave, there's no coming back." Clutching my belongings, tears welled up, blending with a sense of frustration and the physical ache in my neck. This marked the end of my stay at my in-laws' home. My name is Jessica, and I'm 37 years old. I had been married for 4 years. Before my marriage, I worked from home as a writer. This career turn became a necessity after my father's accident, prompting me to return to my parents' home to lend my support. Over time, I found significant success as a freelancer, surpassing the earnings from my previous traditional job. During a college reunion, I reconnected with Larry, who would later become my husband. Despite our contrasting personalities, there was an undeniable attraction, and soon we were married. Tragically, shortly after our wedding, Larry's father passed away. To support his grieving mother, we moved in with her, a decision that set the stage for a challenging cohabitation. From the beginning, life with my mother-in-law was fraught with difficulties. Despite my efforts to be supportive and integrate into the family, she never fully accepted me as Larry's wife. Her constant criticisms and sarcastic remarks began to wear on me. Yet I stayed determined and resilient, making a firm decision to leave and seek a better life for myself when it became unbearable. One evening, as I prepared dinner, Helen, my mother-in-law, questioned the quality of the ingredients. "Did you buy these from that store? How can you prepare a proper meal with such ingredients?" she scoffed. "These were actually from the nearby luxury supermarket. I'm sorry if it's not to your taste, Helen. It's just a simple salad. Larry likes it, and I often make it." "Yes, it's a bit pricey," I replied, trying to keep the peace. "My goodness, act in a way that doesn't bring shame to our family. You never know who's watching," she sighed, clearly disappointed. Her words stung, but they also ignited a resolve within me to gain her recognition through improving my grooming and cooking skills. Despite my daily efforts, her cold gaze never softened. Initially, I brushed off her sarcasm and harsh words, but over time they weighed heavily on me, making me feel invalidated and powerless. I yearned to confide in Larry, but our relationship had shifted. We hardly spent quality time together anymore. "I've been busy with work lately," Larry would say, looking exhausted. Feeling increasingly isolated, I finally gathered the courage to share my concerns with him. "Hey, I have something to discuss," I started one day. Oh, I actually have something to tell you too. I quit my job 4 months ago, Larry interjected. What? Quit? What do you mean? I gasped in surprise. Don't worry, I've already started another job. Remember the select shop I always wanted to open? I finally launched it. I'm co-managing it with Senior Samuel, he revealed, referring to a respected figure from our university known for his leadership and charisma. In college, he developed and successfully sold a game app, later starting a startup with his friends to showcase his skills. In his usual gentle way, but with a hint of guilt in his eyes, he said, I didn't want to worry you or Mom. I'll work harder from now on. Will you support me? His words moved me, yet I hesitated slightly before responding. I'll support you, but about the rent for this house, can you cover all of it? I asked. He looked at me earnestly and pleaded, Please, Jessica, this has always been my dream. It's taking longer than expected to turn a profit. That's why I want to invest more in advertising. I'll definitely get this business on track before we leave here. I need your help to do that. Moved by his passion and sincerity, I couldn't refuse. I could afford the rent with my income, and fortunately we had some savings. More importantly, I have never forgotten the day I chose to marry him, sharing and empathizing with his dreams and passion. If you say so, I understand, but only until the lease on this rental ends. Also, I want to know more about the store you're running, I agreed. Of course, thank you, Larry said, showing me the website of his select shop. I was impressed by its charm and asked if there was anything I could help with. I want you to focus on your work and please don't tell my mother about this. I don't want to worry her, he requested. With this new development, thoughts of my mother-in-law completely left my mind. I was eager to support Larry's business, but the monthly expenses I had to cover kept increasing. Gradually managing the entire household budget, financially aiding my husband, and even providing an allowance to my mother-in-law became solely my responsibility. My only hope was for the rental contract to end quickly. Jessica, could you put off your computer work for a bit and do some cleaning? Since you're staying here, you should be more proactive with the household chores, my mother-in-law instructed one day. Oh, I'm sorry, Mother. I'll start as soon as I finish this job, I replied hurriedly. This is your job. Enough excuses. Get it done quickly. We have guests coming this afternoon. After you're done cleaning, please leave the house, she insisted. My relationship with my unaware mother-in-law remained unchanged over time. On days when she had guests, I always had to vacate the house after finishing the cleaning, seeming to bother her. Fortunately, I could work anywhere with my laptop, which was a small consolation. However, one day held a different outcome. When I returned home in the evening, my mother-in-law, looking satisfied, greeted me with, "Welcome back. I tidied up your room." Confused, I rushed to my office. The room was indeed tidied. In the middle of the room, neatly organized, were a large suitcase and 2 duffel bags. Puzzled, I asked my mother-in-law, "What does this mean, Mother?" This room was originally prepared for guests. I can't tolerate someone with your disregard for housekeeping using it. If you wish to stay here, you'll need to pay a fee. If that doesn't suit you, you may leave immediately. Don't expect to live here luxuriously without contributing, she stated firmly. I bit back my words, feeling a mix of hurt and indignation. As I lowered my head, trying to hide my upset, she added with a tone of finality, "I must say, I don't see you as Larry's rightful wife." With that, she turned and left for the living room. Tears of frustration welled up as I felt isolated and wronged. I tried calling Larry, but he didn't answer. After sending him a message about the situation, his reply came, "Please bear with it a little longer." When Larry came home late that night, I couldn't hold back any longer. "I'm already covering the full rent, and now she expects me to pay extra just to use a room? Her demands are unreasonable," I vented. Larry looked troubled and immediately tried to soothe the situation. "I'm sorry, I'll talk to her. Once we leave this place, you won't have to deal with her again. Just hold on a bit longer," he pleaded. His words calmed me slightly, offering a glimmer of hope. The next morning, it seemed Larry had spoken to his mother. We had breakfast together in an unusually quiet atmosphere, without her typical sarcastic remarks. Since my room had been cleared, I decided to work from the dining table. Mid-morning, my mother-in-law approached unexpectedly. "Are you leaving today?" she inquired. Before I could respond, I felt a sudden sharp pain in my neck. "Ouch, that's hot!" I exclaimed, turning to see her smirking with a hair iron in hand. "Why would you do this?" I managed to ask, clutching my neck, bewildered and in pain. "It's time you felt some heat, too," she sneered. "I wanted to test how thick-skinned you are. You live such a luxurious life, yet you contribute nothing." "I work hard, too," I protested, my voice filled with disbelief and anger. "Why would you do something so cruel?" She scoffed. "You call your at-home job work? You're just using it as an excuse to laze around. Nothing more." Her words stung as I hurried to the kitchen for a cooling pack, the pain in my neck a harsh reminder of the growing rift between us. Overwhelmed by the unfairness of it all, I couldn't help but glare at my mother-in-law. "What's with that look? The look of a pitiful person," she scoffed. "I've reached my limit. Leave this house immediately or I can't be responsible for what happens next." "Am I free to leave?" I questioned, my voice shaky with the weight of the decision. "I won't come back, you know." "Yes, that's fine. I'm fed up with supporting someone like you," she retorted, her words dripping with disdain and disappointment. Overcome with a whirlwind of emotions, I began to cry as I packed my things. Fortunately, since my mother-in-law had already organized my belongings the day before, the process was quick. I left my in-laws' home without a backward glance, and after a brief visit to the hospital, I found solace at my favorite cafe. The spacious tables and tranquil atmosphere provided the perfect setting to focus and gather my thoughts. As I debated whether to contact Larry, I was unexpectedly greeted. "Jessica, is that you?" To my surprise, it was Senior Samuel. "It's been a while. How's Larry doing?" "I heard you were the co-owner of his shop," he remarked. Caught off guard, I apologized for not greeting him earlier. "I only helped with the website design at Larry's request," I explained. Senior Samuel looked puzzled. "Co-owner? What do you mean? I just heard you were the main sponsor." I was taken aback by his words. Larry had lied? This revelation hit me hard. It turned out that Larry had rented a different apartment and had been making an effort during the initial months, a detail he hadn't shared with me. Despite Larry's involvement in the online shop, others were handling the inventory, shipping, and promotion from the outset. Against the advice of Senior Samuel, who suggested he take a more hands-on approach, Larry maintained that such tasks weren't suitable for a businessman. Consequently, there was no growth in foot traffic or sales, just a continual rise in expenses. According to Senior Samuel, Larry was now deeply engrossed in the internet business, spending lavishly on consultants and portraying himself as a successful business owner while sometimes treating his employees poorly. I was stunned by these revelations. The added strain of covering my mother-in-law's expenses stemmed from the depletion of my father-in-law's inheritance, a fact unknown to me until now. Larry's recent pleas for financial help were likely a result of dwindling funds, something he had concealed from me. Connecting the dots with Senior Samuel's insights, the picture became painfully clear. After thanking Senior Samuel, I left the cafe and found myself at my parents' doorstep, luggage in tow. My father greeted me with a surprised look. Overwhelmed, tears streamed down my face as I faced my parents, who had been unaware of my struggles. "Tell us what happened." "Your mom and I are always here for you," my father assured me. Encouraged by their support, I broke down and shared everything. The harsh treatment from my mother-in-law, the financial burdens I carried for the in-laws' household, and the revelations about Larry. Both of my parents were deeply moved and shared in my tears. "There's no need to return to your in-laws. Live for yourself from now on," my father declared, his words echoing with sincerity. That conversation lifted a tremendous weight off my shoulders. What had I been enduring all these months? The only word from Larry was a brief message asking, "Where are you now?" After ignoring several similar inquiries, his attempts to reach out ceased. It seemed my presence in his life was inconsequential. But in that moment of realization, more than sadness, I felt a decisive clarity. Enjoying a simple meal with my parents, I experienced the genuine warmth of family, a stark contrast to what I'd endured. While staying at my parents' house, I began to rediscover myself. About 3 weeks later, Larry called, likely because the rent was due. "Jessica, where are you? Have things calmed down with Mom? She feels bad about it. Aren't you coming back soon?" he asked. "I'm at my parents' house now and I plan to stay here. Your mother said she's tired of taking care of someone like me," I replied calmly, determined to forge a new path for myself free from the burdens of my previous life. Firm in my decision, I told Larry, "I think we should get a divorce." His response was immediate. "Wait, why divorce? If living with Mom is the problem, we can sort it out. I'm coming to pick you up so we can discuss this in person." "Why should we talk now when you were unreachable before? How's your business going?" I asked. There was a pause before he replied, "Actually, I'm consulting with a business expert. There might be a big breakthrough next month." "That's beside the point," I countered. "You haven't shared anything substantial with me, and that's why I don't want to talk anymore. I'll draft the divorce papers and send them to you." I ended the call and hung up. However, that night, Larry unexpectedly showed up at my parents' house. I spoke to him through a small gap in the door, kept secure by the chain. "Jessica, please don't be upset. Let's return home. Mom regrets what happened," he pleaded. "I was forced out by your mother," I reminded him sternly. "You expect me not to take that seriously? She burned me with a hot hair iron. I don't know what she might do next. There's no way I can go back." I showed him the burn mark on my neck. "Did Mom do that?" "I'm so sorry, I didn't know. She told me it was just a minor argument." Larry apologized. "A minor argument?" His trivializing of the incident fueled my anger further. I had intended to discuss divorce calmly, but his dismissiveness made it clear that a calm discussion might not be possible. "I'm not coming back. You should go home too. I'll contact you again tomorrow." "Really? Will you call? I can't accept a divorce without a proper discussion. If you don't call, I'll be back tomorrow," Larry said before leaving. Determined to address the situation formally, I arranged a meeting with Larry and my mother-in-law 5 days later at a chic restaurant located on the 25th floor of a luxury hotel. On the day, I chose to wear a high-end brand dress, styling my hair up to expose the burn on my neck visibly. My mother-in-law seemed displeased by my appearance. "Thank you for gathering today," I began, managing a polite smile as I addressed them. "I've reserved afternoon tea, so please enjoy it." Larry appeared somewhat relieved by my composed demeanor. As tea and small appetizers were served, my mother-in-law broke the silence. "Jessica, I'm truly sorry about last time. I was wrong," she admitted, her tone contrite. Larry had reprimanded her severely. "You'll forgive me, won't you?" she pleaded. I didn't respond immediately, choosing instead to quietly continue enjoying my appetizer, pondering the sincerity of her apology and the next steps in our complicated relationship. I slowly turned my neck to display the burn scar. I can forgive, but not until this scar fades. Also, are you aware that Larry quit his job? The revelation made Larry visibly tense, and my mother-in-law looked at him in shock. "What do you mean he quit? He's been claiming he's busy every day," she stammered, her voice a mix of confusion and alarm. "Yes, he's busy. Busy pretending to be a successful businessman," I added, trying to keep my tone even. "Larry, what's going on? Explain yourself," my mother-in-law demanded, her earlier panic turning to urgency. As she pressed him for answers, I watched the scene unfold with a bittersweet sense of vindication. Meanwhile, the server brought over a tea stand laden with enticing sweets, which I sampled as I enjoyed the view from the 25th floor cafe, a view that seemed to mirror the high drama unfolding at our table. "By the way, Larry, what have you been doing recently? I heard from Senior Samuel that you quit the select shop. Is that true?" I asked, watching as he paled, his expression flipping between surprise and fear. My mother-in-law, gripping his arm tightly, bombarded him with questions. "What happened? Why would you do that?" I continued, "I know everything, Larry. Ultimately, you were more obsessed with the idea of being successful than actually being a businessman. You had no real business sense, yet you impulsively went ahead and ended up squandering all the inheritance your father left, didn't you?" "Yes, that's right." I addressed my mother-in-law directly, whose face was now etched with suspicion and growing anger. "Larry has used up not only his inheritance, but our household finances are in ruins because of his actions." I let the weight of the situation sink in for a moment before adding, "I have been covering all the expenses for the house. Even the allowance you thought Larry was giving you came from my wallet. In addition to that, I've been paying for all of Larry's misguided ventures." My mother-in-law slumped back into the sofa, her expression one of shock and despair. The realization of the situation seemed to drain the fight from her as she absorbed the gravity of the financial disaster wrought by her son. As I observed their reactions, I continued, "While he's been masquerading as a businessman, we've been sinking financially." Larry tried to offer reassurance. "Don't worry, Mom, with Jessica's income, we manage." I quickly interjected, "Don't trivialize this. I heard you're starting yet another business. We're already scraping the bottom. No more squandering money on your fantasies." The cafe grew quiet, the tension palpable. I finished the last of my tea in one gulp and made my intentions clear. "I can no longer shoulder the responsibility for both of you who have effectively become penniless. You'll need to handle next week's rent payment. As for the divorce, we'll proceed with it through a lawyer." Larry pleaded with tears in his eyes. "I don't want a divorce. Please don't do this." However, my decision was firm. My mother-in-law, her face ashen, implored me for help. "Helen, you once said you didn't accept me as family. Well, as compensation for the burn, I'd like you to start by making this payment. I hope you still have some savings left," I stated resolutely, leaving them to absorb the shock. Exiting the luxury hotel, I glanced back at the towering structure, hoping they felt the dramatic shift from their high life to their new reality, a symbolic fall from grace. Ultimately, we proceeded with the divorce. Larry resisted initially, but when I threatened to involve the police in the assault, he capitulated. I could never forgive my mother-in-law, but ensuring her absence from my life would help me forget her. As part of the settlement, I demanded a significant sum for emotional distress. Later on, they moved into a cramped apartment. The dynamics between my wasteful ex-husband and his disillusioned mother became increasingly strained. Striving for independence, my once haughty mother-in-law resorted to part-time cleaning jobs, a thought that brought a wry smile to my face. Larry, meanwhile, found himself mired in debt, juggling multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet at night. The irony of their changed circumstances was not lost on me. It appears that a regular job is more fitting for Larry's real capabilities. The dynamic personality that initially drew me to him turned out to be mere impulsiveness and superficiality when viewed in a different light. The luxurious lifestyle enabled by my father-in-law's inheritance only magnified these traits. Now, I've shifted back to actively working from my parents' home. I later met with Senior Samuel to update him on the situation and express my thanks. He commended my writing abilities, and I've started receiving projects from him. For now, my focus is on rebuilding my life and pursuing my well-being while staying with my parents. Recently, a surprising incident left me quite shaken. My mother-in-law, in an unforeseen and unsettling act, took my passport and deliberately burned it. The passport quickly caught fire, reducing it to ashes in mere moments. This act abruptly halted my plans for a vacation to St. Bees Island, leaving me in utter disbelief. As I confronted her, asking for an explanation, she simply smirked and coldly informed me that since I was a stranger in her eyes, I would not be traveling anywhere but staying home. Beside her, my husband only offered a grin, complicit in the deceit. Their cruel maneuver was shocking, though not entirely unexpected. However, their level of sneakiness was something I had not anticipated. They seemed to take pleasure in their scheme, sharing a laugh over their perceived triumph. At that moment, frustrated and needing to assert my identity, I reminded them of who I am. My name is Kayla, I'm 30 years old, and I'm a linguist. I study and teach languages at the university, a role that often takes me abroad for extended periods as I engage with different cultures and share my knowledge through my organization. This job requires me to travel frequently, often leaving me away from home for months. Before this job, I never envisioned marriage in my future. However, everything changed when I returned to my home country at 25 and met Peter, who would later become my husband. Despite the challenges posed by my career, which demands that I spend about half the year overseas, Peter and I maintained our relationship through constant communication via phone calls and emails. We got married when I was 27, and he has been incredibly supportive, even though our marriage involves long periods of separation. Today, as I make my way home from the airport, it's been 6 months since I last saw my husband. Despite the long flight and the draining events that unfolded with my passport, I'm filled with excitement rather than fatigue. I'm eager to reunite with Peter, stepping quickly towards what I hope will be a joyful reunion and perhaps a resolution to the recent turmoil caused by his family. After a long absence, I arrived home to find Peter not yet back, so I began to tidy up a bit. Although I always remind him to keep our place neat, I usually find it somewhat disarrayed. Normally, this would bother me, but today I decided to let it slide because I was simply too excited to see him again. As I busied myself in the kitchen, I heard the front door open. It was Peter. Overjoyed, I rushed to greet him with a warm, "Welcome home, Peter. It's so good to see you." His response was lukewarm. "Oh, hi, Kayla. You're back. Is that all? After 6 months apart?" I couldn't hide my disappointment. "We haven't seen each other in 6 months, Peter. Aren't you going to say you missed me?" He shrugged. "We've been doing this for a while, so I guess I'm used to it. I'm just really tired. Is dinner ready?" "Yes, it's ready. Let's eat." Dinner felt special, as eating with Peter after so many months apart usually would, but today was tinged with a bit of sadness. His attention seemed divided, constantly glancing at his phone. I couldn't help but express my frustration. "Hey, Peter, why do you keep staring at your phone?" He was dismissive. "There's nothing wrong, but you've been gone and we've stayed connected through calls and emails, right? There's nothing new to discuss." That hurt. "That might be true, Peter, but it's been a long time since we've been together. Shouldn't that count for something?" My tone sharpened with my growing frustration, which seemed to upset him. He stood up abruptly, placed his phone on the table, and glared at me. "You know what? You just came off a plane, but I'm exhausted from work. Just got it?" Stung, I retorted, "Hold on, I also came straight here after work. Don't talk to me like that." "I didn't ask you to rush. You chose to come home immediately," he replied coldly. His words stung, but I needed to make my feelings clear. "You don't have to say it like that. Despite everything, I missed you." At that moment, both of us paused, the weight of our words hanging between us. After months apart, I came home only to find the atmosphere chillingly tense. Peter's reception was colder than expected. As we sat down for dinner, he blurted out, "I'm just saying, I didn't ask you to rush home. If you're going to act like this, maybe you shouldn't come back at all. You're being annoying, Kayla." Frustrated, he slammed the table and stormed out of the room, leaving his dinner untouched. Alone and confused, I wondered to myself, why is he acting so cold? I had been eagerly anticipating our reunion, but it seemed I was the only one excited. What was the point of coming home early if it was only going to end in disappointment? Tears spilled onto the table as I sat there, the joy of our reunion overshadowed by a sinking feeling of dread. The next morning, the tension hadn't lifted. When I greeted him with a good morning, he gave me a frosty look and said bitterly, "I envy you. You get to relax at home all the time while I'm stuck working." That wasn't true, and I corrected him. "That's not accurate, Peter. I have a lot of work too. Summarizing our activities, preparing for the next training session. It's more work than you think." He dismissed my efforts. Sure, but you can do it from home. I wish I had a job where I could take half the year off. You enjoy your time at home, princess. Stunned by his sarcastic tone, I watched as he left the house without another word. We had our share of arguments before, but he had never been this cutting. His sarcastic demeanor left me puzzled and worried about the growing rift between us. While I pondered over what might help mend our relationship, I busied myself with household chores, vacuuming, and changing the linens. Amidst this, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law. With a sense of unease, I answered, "Hello, Kayla here." "Hi, Kayla. It's been a while. I heard you're back home and had a rough day yesterday." "Yes, that's right. And I also heard you upset Peter. He was quite angry." The call added to my confusion and worry, leaving me to question how I could bridge the gap that had formed between us since my return. During the phone call, my mother-in-law's suggestion caught me off guard. "Now that you're back, how about we plan a family trip?" she proposed. Before I could even process the idea, she continued, "I was talking with my husband about going to St. Bert's Island, and Peter mentioned he wanted to join us. You're used to traveling abroad, right? Could you help us with hotel reservations and other arrangements?" Her request was loaded. From her tone, it was clear she didn't actually relish the thought of traveling with me, but saw an opportunity to leverage my travel experience. My relationship with my mother-in-law had always been strained. She had never hidden her disdain for me. Ever since we first met at the wedding reception, her attitude had been consistently sarcastic. Even after 3 years of marriage, her views hadn't softened. When I was working abroad, she often sent me messages that stung. "How can you be a wife and stay away from home for months? If you don't take care of the house, I'd rather my son marry someone else. It was a mistake to let him marry you." These memories made me apprehensive about her proposal. It felt like I was being used to facilitate their travel plans, a task that seemed more appealing than enduring her usual critiques. I was frustrated with myself for my inability to decline, even though I recognized that I was being manipulated. A few hours later, Peter returned from work in a noticeably better mood than he had been earlier. He dropped his briefcase on the sofa, flashed a wide smile, and said, "Mom called, didn't she? We can go on a trip to St. B's." "Yeah, I heard," I replied cautiously. "But you're not thinking of turning it down, are you? Mom wants you to come with us," he pressed. His enthusiasm made it even harder to express my reservations. I understood his desire for me to be involved, but the dynamics made me uneasy. How could I navigate this situation without escalating tensions or feeling even more used? As the conversation about the family trip continued, I cautiously suggested, "Why don't you just go with your mom and dad as you originally planned?" The moment those words left my lips, Peter's attitude shifted dramatically. He clicked his tongue, and his voice took on a more threatening tone. "You need to understand your role here. The only time you're useful to us is when we're traveling." His words stung. "You don't have to speak like that," I protested. "It's true, isn't it?" he retorted, undeterred. "Anyway, you'll handle all the flight and hotel bookings, and everything should be in my name, as you probably know." "But Peter, you're going to pay for the whole trip?" I asked, trying to clarify our financial arrangement. "What are you talking about? We'll split the cost 50-50ths. It's a small price to pay to show respect to our parents," he argued, implying that my objection was disrespectful. "And what is that supposed to mean? If you've got time to lounge around at home, make the reservations now," he demanded. "This isn't right. I don't want to," I mumbled, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are you mumbling about?" he scoffed, grabbing a beer from the fridge and downing it in one gulp. Despite my inner turmoil and the unfairness of the situation, I felt cornered. Embarrassed and without a real choice, I proceeded to make all the arrangements for the flights and accommodations for the trip to St. Bert's Island, just as Peter and his mother had insisted. On the day of the trip, I was set to pick them up at my in-laws' house and head straight to the airport. But a few days before our departure, I found myself restless and unable to sleep. Late at night, I realized Peter wasn't beside me. I walked to the living room and overheard him on the phone. "It's okay, Mom. I'll be there first thing in the morning as planned. Please handle the passport issue anyway. Seriously, I'm looking forward to it. I'll make sure to introduce her to you," he said into the receiver. Hearing this, I was filled with a mix of emotions. What was supposed to be a family trip was turning into a series of commands and manipulations, and now there were secrets too. I stood there, unsure of how to confront this new revelation. When I returned home, Peter's conversation still echoed in my mind. He had mentioned a passport and introduced someone, and since he was speaking to his mother, I was sure it was my mother-in-law on the other end. There seemed to be hidden plans that I wasn't privy to, which made me uneasy about the upcoming trip. It was clear that something was being orchestrated behind my back, but I couldn't grasp the full extent of it. Resolved to remain vigilant, I prepared for our departure with caution. The day of our trip to St. Bert's Island finally arrived. I methodically packed both my carry-on and handbag, including items for my husband, ensuring we were ready for the journey. With everything set, Peter and I drove to my in-laws' house. As we approached, I braced myself, unsure of what awaited us, but ready to face whatever might come. Upon our arrival, it was only my mother-in-law who greeted us. "Oh, hi, Kayla. It's been a while. Good to see you. We're almost ready. I just need to grab a few things for the trip, so it might be a little while," she said, her tone casual but with a sense of urgency that raised my suspicions further. "Okay, take your time," I replied. Then she added, "Oh, and Kayla, could you bring the carry-on case from the other room? It's heavy, so please get Peter to help you." "Sure, I'll do that," I agreed, keenly observing the exchange of knowing glances between my husband and mother-in-law. I kept my passport securely in my pocket, an instinctual move born from the mistrust that had been building. As I followed my husband's directions and returned to the living room with the carry-on, I found my mother-in-law waiting with a mischievous grin. To my horror, she was holding my passport in her hands. "Now you can't go on the trip to St. Bert's," she declared with a smirk. "What do you mean? I'm going to burn this passport right now," she threatened. "What did you just say?" I reacted in disbelief, the gravity of her words sinking in. "I was just using you to handle the trip arrangements," she admitted callously. "You're a stranger here, so you'll be staying behind. Too bad." Her words struck me like a cold slap. The situation was far worse than I had imagined, and the betrayal cut deep. I realized I was not just an outsider in their plans, but a mere pawn in whatever game they were playing. The revelation left me reeling, unsure of how to respond to such blatant manipulation and deceit. In a sudden and shocking move, my mother-in-law stormed into the kitchen, lit a lighter, and set a passport ablaze in the sink. The document quickly caught fire, turning into black ashes before our eyes. As it was completely destroyed, she triumphantly declared, "We did it!" My husband joined in with a cheer. "Yeah, Mom, we made it." "No," I interjected. "It's just the three of us on this trip, right? We'll get to meet Peter's new girlfriend when we get back." "Yeah, I've already set that up," my mother-in-law replied nonchalantly. "We don't need this useless woman anymore," my father-in-law chimed in coldly. He then pulled out his cell phone and showed me pictures of himself with another woman, looking pleased with himself. "I'm not divorcing you for the sake of my reputation, but you'll be staying here while we go on our trip. When we get back, I'll move in with her and you can leave." My mother-in-law laughed mockingly at his words. Their expressions were full of malice. At that moment, I realized I no longer belonged in a family like this. I forced a smile and asked, "By the way, whose passport is that?" "What are you talking about? It's yours, of course. I took it out of your handbag," she said confidently. "My passport is right here," I said, holding up my actual passport from my pocket. "What? Why? It can't be," she stammered, her confidence faltering. I showed her my passport still intact. "Yes, it's my passport. See for yourself." The realization dawned on her face, pale with panic. "That's not possible," she muttered, her voice trembling. It seemed my mother-in-law had mistakenly thought she had taken my passport from my handbag. Her plans, driven by malice, had not involved checking the passport thoroughly before burning it. "Whose passport did I burn then?" she asked, her voice quivering with a mix of fear and confusion. "I guess it was your son's passport that was in there," I suggested. "You burned my son's passport?" she asked, horrified. My mother-in-law turned white as the gravity of her mistake hit her. The family dynamics, already strained, were now irrevocably shaken by her rash actions and the underlying schemes that had come to light. The moment my mother-in-law realized the passport she burned was her son's, chaos erupted. My husband, furious, lashed out at her. "What have you done? I told you to be careful. I only found one passport in her handbag. Who would have thought it belonged to me?" "I don't care. You didn't check properly, and now look what happened," he shouted. "You're saying it's my fault? If you had checked from the start, I wouldn't have made this mistake," she retorted, her voice rising in defense. Their argument escalated quickly, and they began blaming each other. Amidst the tumult, my husband turned to me. "Hey, Kayla, do something," but I was not about to be dragged further into their mess. "Seriously, who do you think you are telling me what to do? You cheated on me behind my back. How dare you both? You and your mother are despicable," I fired back. "Hey, who do you think you're talking to?" my husband snapped. "I'm talking to you and your awful mother. Don't think I'm just going to let this slide. You're going to pay me back for the affair and all the nasty things your mother has said to me. Be ready," I declared, my resolve hardening. Just then, my father-in-law appeared, drawn by the noise. "What's going on here? What are you doing?" he demanded. After I explained everything, he was livid. The planned trip was immediately canceled, and the fallout was severe. My mother-in-law faced a divorce, and my husband was disowned by his father and banned from returning home. I consulted a lawyer and proceeded with the divorce. I also demanded alimony from both my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law, which they had to pay in one lump sum, along with covering the costs of the canceled trip to St. Nevis Island. Financially unprepared, they had to borrow money to meet these demands. In the end, my ex-husband, now living with his mother, found himself in a tough financial situation. He was also left by the woman he had an affair with. Meanwhile, I used the alimony money to move into a condo and start anew, embracing a life of independence. Free from cheating and mistreatment, I faced many challenges but emerged stronger. Now, I'm loving life, planning to continue my travels, learning about different cultures, and sharing my experiences with the world.